Today I'm very excited to be joined by my friend Nikki, aka City Councillor. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm excited for multiple reasons because my favourite musical event of the year so far was witnessing the City Councillor Orchestra at the Cedar Cultural Centre. Congratulations again for being one of the Cedar Cultural Commission's artists.
Thank you. It was a really incredible experience.
We will be witnessing some highlights from that, courtesy of the Cedar Cultural Centre's footage that they got that night. So that's one reason why I'm excited, because we're going to take a look back at the songs composed for that commission and initially performed with the full orchestra. Not only were they performed, but you created an accompanying collection of essays called Questions and Lies. That's the first reason why I'm excited. The second reason is because the debut of a new version, like the main version going forward of City Councillor, is about to occur at the Back to the City showcase that's happening on Thursday at Mortimer's. You'll be playing with Karate Break. You'll be playing just after Karate Break and before Edward the Confessor and Candid Kid. So what form will City Councillor be taking for the first time on Thursday?
Yeah, so we'll have bass and drums played by Antoine Martineau and Jared Hemming, who also performed with the orchestra. And then Amy Hager, who did background vocals and co-composed one of the songs from the commission, will be playing keys with me. So we have 4 synthesizers spanning like a few decades of technology.
Wow, how many decades?
I think like 3.5.
Wow, that's quite a few decades of synths. Whose is the oldest?
We actually all play all of the synthesizers throughout the set. So we just have them all kind of set up as like a big kind of pod at the front of the stage, and then we rotate around.
Wow, that's going to be visually arresting.
I think it'll probably be actually pretty boring to watch, considering that you're just sitting at like a bunch of keyboards. You know, it's not a very like charismatic thing.
Okay. I suspect that that's not the case, but you can close your eyes and just enjoy and enjoy the performance.
It'll sound great though.
Cool. Well, and you're going to be playing the same songs from the commission's performance.
Correct.
Is that correct?
We're not going to play all of the songs, but all of the songs that we are playing will be from the commission.
Yeah.
And so we're staying pretty true to the arrangements that I wrote in the latter half of last year, and just kind of like one keyboard is playing what the saxophones played, and while the other keyboard is playing the harp part, and something like that. So.
Yeah, okay. There's a third reason why I'm excited. I almost forgot. I got so excited about the first two. 2 things are happening with the orchestra in June. So if you missed what was my favourite musical event of the year so far, then you can see something very much like it at Ice House on June 9th.
Yep, with Fourth Curtis.
With Fourth Curtis?
Yeah.
I'm even more excited.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
So the orchestra is going to be performing at Ice House on June 9th, and then just after that, coming in to do a Back to the City session that will become available in the middle of June, just before a second commission bears its fruits. So what is this second commission?
It is at the Walker Art Center as a part of their summer series called Terrace Thursdays. And the 4-piece is going to be working on some new songs, and then we've also been working with a projection designer to conceive of a participatory visual element that reflects some of the themes of the music, as well as kind of the overarching City Councillor project of talking about your feelings about the government or about society.
Right, yeah. The way in which it was phrased in the bio encapsulates it very nicely. Nikki aims to make music about the emotional impact of bad policy. So far, there's been Public Record, the first EP, and there was the single Desire. Yeah, I feel like a song like Desire, you know, the single, obviously it's kind of exploring some quite different territory to the collection of songs for the commission.
Yeah, the thing about Desire that I was thinking about is just kind of like these bigger trends about romantic love that everybody experiences, but I don't think we always talk about, you know, and just the I don't know, especially like I feel like this is so common in the queer community of like the amount that you invest your emotional energy in people that don't reflect it back to you.
Oh, desire.
And I mean, it's one of the like most lyrically basic songs that I think I've ever written. Like, it's basically like 3 lines is the whole song.
Basic. if by basic we mean not many lyrics, but the lyrics are doing a lot. The 3 lines are, I want you because I want you to want me more. I want you because you make me want you more. Oh, desire.
It's also like a big reference to Joanna Newsom, that song "Sawdust and Diamonds."
Yeah,
if you know that.
I do. Is there a particular lyric that you're referencing?
Yeah, well, it's just the repetition of "Oh, desire."
Oh, desire. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm like singing basically like a convoluted reference to that segment at the end of "Sawdust and Diamonds," while Jenny Hansen, who played bass on the track, is playing some of the lyrical melodies on the bass as well.
Right, yeah. So that's kind of a standalone song insofar as it is about just romantic relationships or interpersonal relationships. Yeah. I love how Don't Ask, which is is that a song that you're playing with the 4-piece?
Yeah. I think that might actually be our single.
Oh, cool.
We'll see.
Yeah. Nice. So from the previous single to the next single, Don't Ask is, in the Questions and Lies booklet, you're highlighting the kind of behavior that one gets from Republican congressmen is not the kind of behavior that one would be happy with in an interpersonal relationship.
I think those 2 songs definitely are talking to each other in terms of like...
That was my
thought. Like perspectives and sentiment. And I did write them around the same time. So I actually started writing Don't Ask before I even got the Cedar Commission. And then didn't know what to do with it. Like, I had a few pieces to it, but I couldn't really formulate it into something that made sense to me.
Sure.
And so finally, in the context of writing for the orchestra, I was able to like flesh out the ideas in it a little bit more. But was kind of like playing with similar ideas in both of them in terms of like I feel like there's a lot of similarities in what we are willing to like put up with in romantic contexts and what we like are also willing to put up in political contexts.
Right.
And I don't know, I was just kind of exploring those 2 different universes.
Right. And as much as we are willing to put up with things in a romantic or interpersonal context, at least there's more consensus about, well, that's not okay, actually.
Yeah.
Like, so to use that and that, having recognized and exploring that analogy, to say, yes, well, think of like, would we accept such ambivalence from a lover is the way in which you phrase it in the booklet. And the answer is, well, no. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the answer is a question. Do you?
Right.
That's like
so the answer is hopefully no.
Yeah.
And also hopefully no in this context too. You did highlight before performing this song at the Cedar Cultural Center that you don't hate all Republicans.
True.
You highlighted that you love your dad.
Yeah. Although my dad did scream from the audience, "I'm not a Republican," because he identifies as like a libertarian, but he's voted mostly for Republicans his whole life. So I'm like, this isn't a meaningful distinction right now.
It was, for me at least, inaudible distinction. So that worked out okay. You wrote all the lines and then effectively, is it fair to say, like commissioned the performers to perform the lines that you'd composed?
Exactly. Yeah. So my process was I like plugged my keyboard into my computer, and then I would just play out what I want the instrument to play on the keyboard, and then record that as MIDI to get a demo version of it to share with folks, and then from the MIDI tracks could print out sheet music, and then I provided sheet music to everybody.
With the exception, is this true of one song that Hillary James?
So that one we wrote kind of collaboratively, and so she wrote the cello line for that, and then I kind of just arranged all of the other pieces around her line.
Cool. So Don't Ask. What's the instrumentation with the orchestra? What are the prominent instruments for this version?
Yeah. So well, everybody plays throughout the song at varying points. The trumpet is very prominent with the lead line that comes in that introduces the chorus melody, basically.
Is that Bobby?
Yep. Bobby Sanchez, and that ends up becoming kind of like the prominent theme in the outro of the song that then I and the choir are singing along with. And Marielle, the bassoonist, kind of comes in at the end with like a counterposing melody that winds around the trumpet line. And then the rest of the instruments are basically playing whole notes for most of it until you get to the driving section, and then they're just playing like eighth notes on one note for the whole measure, you know?
Yeah.
So it was one of like it was one of the more like basic songs compositionally because there's not a whole lot of moving elements to it. And so then what creates the arc in the song is more when you add the voice rather than what exactly the voice is, rather than having the voice play a busy line. You know what I mean?
And what is the process of transforming that particular song into the new 4-piece version been like?
Yeah, that was actually one of the easiest ones because it's like you're just playing chords, and so it's like pretty easy to just like coordinate your hands like that.
Again, I thought it would. That's kind of why we're beginning with that one, because some of the other ones I can imagine would be quite the challenge to transform from a full orchestra to.
Yeah, definitely. But that one is so fun because what then creates the like climactic moments of the song are adding in some like really, really rich, luscious synth tones. And
who's playing those?
So that is Amy. Okay. And that's from the oldest synth that we have, a Yamaha SY77 from the I think that's early 80s.
Which has been the song which it's been hardest to transform from orchestra context to 4-piece?
Well, there's still 2 that we haven't even really begun.
Yeah, that have not yet proved possible.
And that's Amendments and Wounds. And the challenge with Wounds is that there's this part at the end when basically there are like 6 different like melodic parts happening simultaneously that intertwine with one another, and that was I mean, Amy and I just have a total of 4 hands, and so it's like not, just like I haven't been able to like stomach the idea of having to like cut some of the parts out in order to play it live because I really like the way that they are in conversation with one another. And especially on Wounds, it's like this like part of the like the idea of the song at this like the coda section at the end is that it's like frenetic and there's all these counterposing things that are happening, and by the time it ends you're just like there's so much chaos and there's so much noise happening and it's so busy and there's so many moving parts, and then it just kind of like cuts off with this kind of beautiful, mournful little like harp and saxophone little thing. And I feel like that's so exemplary of problems with our immigration system and the way that it works, you know, and like
the way in which the song sounds.
And the way and the chaos of the parts intertwining with one another, and like, I mean, in some situations, you know, it's like when you look at our immigration system, you will look at like maybe like just the H-1B visa program, you know, and you can understand the logic of that program, and you can maybe see its shortcomings, but you can see why it exists the way that it does. But then when you stack that on top of our diversity visa program, stack that on top of our family visa program, stack that on top of our like student visa program or visiting scholar program, you know, there's like all of these different pieces of the immigration system that like individually you can see some sort of logic to it, but as soon as you put it together, it's just like, what the hell did we do?
Yeah, like it. You said it's one of the most broken parts of our government.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah. Could you talk about the experience that you had that you then shared with Hillary, and how this one song ended up being written in this different collaborative manner?
When I first found out that I got the commission, I had one-on-one meetings with all the different people involved in it just to get a sense of what issues were prevalent on their mind, what sort of things they were interested in contributing to it. And so Hillary and I got some margaritas at Tracy's and talked about music for a while, and then that just like devolved into a conversation about like the state of our society and things that were weighing heavily on our mind. And I had brought up an immigration case that had came across my desk of a family of 4 or 5 children here in South Minneapolis who owned an auto body shop, employed a number of people, and for whatever reason, his immigration status had lapsed, and ICE had detained him and was trying to deport him. And while he was in detention, ICE had beat him and broken his arm and broke his nose, and then deported him. And so I was just it's just so messed up, this idea. I mean, it's not rare that ICE is one of the most unaccountable levels of our government, and one of the reasons that they are so unaccountable is because they are allowed to operate in extreme secrecy under the guise of Homeland Security, and then secondly, the people who that they abuse are not U.S. citizens, and so they do not have the same amount of constitutional rights as U.S. citizens do. And then before the people in their detention can file any sort of lawsuit in response to that abuse, ICE can just deport them, and then they have no legal standing to be able to sue, or else they may have legal standing, but it's so burdensome to try to file a lawsuit when you're halfway across the country, and in the case of this gentleman, live in a country that he hadn't visited since he was probably 3 years old. And so yeah, I had just some lyrics that I had jotted down when I was thinking about this, and had a little melody idea in my head, and I just sang it to Hillary, and then out of nowhere she just whips out that frenetic eighth note pattern, you know, and that became that. And then I went home and just made the MIDI version on my keyboard, and then started arranging everything around it.
Did you have, at what stage did the lyric "You can't ice the wound when ice is the wound"?
That was the first thing.
Yeah. That's maybe I can relate to. That's my favorite City Council lyric. That's so clever, but obviously beyond being clever.
Just nerdy and direct.
Yeah, it seems like analogy and metaphor seem to be. Metaphor seems to be a really important tool for City Council. Is that something that you're consciously doing? So, apart from, you should be proud of the clever wordplay, but beyond that, I feel like it's a really important way to make something real to a person that would otherwise it's not their experience.
Definitely.
Is that something that you're consciously doing a lot?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that most art is driven by love in whatever form, you know? And so what the way that I try to approach writing these songs is how does love play into this? You know, is it the love of your family and the way that families are being broken up in the case of wounds?
Yeah.
Is it don't ask, is there a direct analogy that you can draw with a sort of relationship dynamic that is more accessible to people? I mean, I just want to find a way to make this make sense to somebody in a way that's not just intellectualizing the issue, but walking away feeling like you got kicked in the stomach.
Right. Yeah, that is what being city councillor is.
I mean, I don't want to kick people in the stomach, but I want to give people you're not going to be able to be invested in something if you don't understand emotionally why it is wrong and what you want to do about it, you know?
How about, what I found it interesting that you highlighted in the Questions and Lies pamphlet, that a lot of people who would not consider using the phrase "Make America Great Again" are nevertheless driven by and invested in the ideology, the broader ideology that leads to a slogan like that. Could you expand, I mean, am I paraphrasing you correctly, and could you expand on what you mean by that? And then perhaps the issue of, if there are people who are more unconsciously invested in something akin to that idea, how is the music kind of speaking to them?
Yeah, so for that song, What You Want to Hear, the starting idea in my mind was, I want to make a song that would get stuck in some white suburban, capital L liberal person who thinks that they are that voted for Obama and thinks that they're a good example of how the future is going to be better.
Sure.
But would maybe be the manager at Starbucks that called a cop on 2 black people who were waiting for their white friend to show up.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to like, I wanted to like get something that's like super poppy,
that this
and,
person
like,
would
that's
like
an earworm, and like a repeated line that after you're done hearing the song is just going to be stuck in your head, you know.
Yeah,
And so
it's what they want to hear.
That's the line, what you want to hear, you know. And that's like the whole idea of the song, is it's just like how you are filtering out all of the negative consequences of your ideology in order to only be able to tell yourself the good that you are enacting in the world, you know. And like the blinders that you put on to see that.
Right, you're right. Yeah, and another moment that really struck me an analogous moment that struck me in the pamphlet was highlighting how within an ideology that speaks so much of family values, how simultaneously that, you know, that might be the way in which a person speaks about speaks you know, about what's important, whilst also, you know, being invested in a system that's breaking up families.
I mean, I think that this idea that the Republican Party is pro-life in any way, shape, or form is absolutely foolish. Like, they are pro-birth, and that is it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a much better way more accurate way to phrase it.
Yeah.
The other song that has not yet been worked on with the 4-piece isn't the final one that was performed. Is that right?
Second to last.
Second to last.
Yeah.
Okay. So Amendment is the name of this song, and the manner in which it engages with a fact that is not much discussed, or the fact of potentially being on the verge of the first constitutional convention
since our constitution was created.
Yeah, since it was created. Yeah. The manner of engaging with that is nuanced and interesting. So could you, two things, could you provide a bit more context about that, and also then clarify what the song is communicating regarding that?
Yeah, so there are two ways that the United States can change its constitution.
Yeah.
The main way that it has been amended throughout our country's history has been through Congress. Both houses of Congress have to pass, I think it's like 2/3 in order to send it to the states, and then 3/4 of the states have to ratify that amendment. That's how we outlawed slavery. That's how we passed the how we prohibited and then unprohibited alcohol consumption. That's how we did everything, you know. But the other way that you can amend the Constitution is by calling a constitutional convention, and that's where 2/3 of the states can agree to open up this convention, and that opens up every single piece of the Constitution for conversation.
Right.
Whereas if an amendment is introduced in Congress, that is one discrete thing. It would be offered as a discrete amendment to the Constitution. It may like strike out text the way that like the amendment that legalized alcohol consumption, again, just kind of struck out the Prohibition Amendment, but doesn't like remove that language entirely from the Constitution. But a convention opens up everything, and so you can start from scratch and reorganize the entire structure of the government from the ground up. The folks who have been pushing for the Constitutional Convention are, it's like in the realm of the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a conservative, state-focused organization that creates model policy for legislators and then just gets it enacted all over the country. They are pushing it primarily for, according to them, a balanced budget amendment, which the House of Representatives actually recently voted on as well, the U.S. House. And then some like unspecified limits to federal powers, which, I mean, I wouldn't, like, it's kind of scary to me to like open up a conversation with such vague terminology to begin with,
Right.
Especially with the understanding that like there is no way that the discussion could be limited to just those things.
Once the conversation is happening, it's a conversation about everything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep. And
everything could be.
And that's even like the late Justice Scalia, you know, who's like no liberal by any means. Even he was like very like wary of the idea of calling a constitutional convention by that very idea that it's Pandora's box, and that it is way more responsible at this point in a society, in a civilization, to like not be making so many rapid, like fundamental changes all at once.
Yes, right. In the essay accompanying amendments, you begin by highlighting that we worship the Constitution as if it's some kind of deity, an unfallible arrangement of principles unaffected by technological, moral, or philosophical evolution. I feel like in some of the other songs, like in Slow Burn, for example, when the choir asking, will we grow? Will we change? Like I feel like city councillor, orchestra-style city councillor, is kind of almost exemplifying like the type of evolution that's necessary, like the way in which all the different parts are weaving together, the multiple vocals in there. There it's kind of demonstrating, okay, we're better than this set of principles. We can evolve beyond it. I feel like the music is kind of demonstrating that. And yet, in amendments, we need Was this a challenge to write this song? Because it's about something that many people are unaware of, and there's a nuanced point about...
Honestly, I feel like that was one of the easiest ones to write, and it came together so quickly. I mean, it's also lyrically one of the most basic songs. Amendments is more the sort of thought that I'm having all the time when I go about the organizing work that I do, which is like, it's hard to convince people that incremental change is worth the investment of your energy, because it can feel like such an insult when stuff is so bad at the present moment than to suggest that we need to just be patient,
Sure.
And I mean, I feel like there are some analogies the way that people say like, oh, you need to like wait your turn if you're trying to run for office, or like pay your dues or something like that. And that's like not what I'm getting at. It's not that we need to like that we need to wait for some sort of like experience or legitimacy, but rather that like understand that there is some wisdom in the structures that exist, and that the change that we need to make in order for it to not be disastrous,
right? Like some wisdom in being small c conservative, as Republicans, who one would expect to be about conserving the Constitution, push for that convention.
There is some irony there. For sure.
Right.
That's not to say that that the system, the way that it works right now, does not present the opportunity for radical change. But rather that like the rule of law is something that prevents the most oppressed people in our society from becoming even more oppressed. I mean, if we have a situation wherein the federal government no longer exists, it's not like the social issues that we currently experience around wealth inequality and racism and sexism are going to go away. In fact, they would be exacerbated because the wealthy are still going to have all the resources, but now we don't have a government to at least attempt to provide some base amount of human rights to people.
I think another song in which these issues are being explored is Mullet Over. What is the significance of that phrase?
So that's just like a cheesy reference to Robert Mueller, the special investigator for Trump's crimes.
It's not just that, though.
It's true, it's about it is a reference to that with like, and also this like idea of the processes that our government works through being very painfully slow. And it can feel like an insult to be told to wait, but that I think the line that I use in the essay is painfully slow is better than painfully still.
Absolutely. That's a great line.
And so that was just like a line that I had been like singing to myself. The song Mullet Over overall is about not just Trump, but Trumpism, this all of these like really terrible values that are exemplified in American toxic masculinity and like neoliberalism and neocolonialism and whatnot.
You highlight in the essay that Trump's disdain for women, people of color, immigrants, and LGBTQ people shares a common thread: the belief that the white American man should be the center. that phrase, the way in which you phrase that, makes me think of
Commander Tantrum?
Yes, it is that.
Yep.
Makes me think of Commander Tantrum. Commander Tantrum. Sounds different when I say it. Makes me think of Commander Tantrum. And in particular, your anecdote accompanying Commander Tantrum in the pamphlet. Could you share that anecdote now? I feel like there's a bridge between the two songs.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not going to be able to verbalize it as poetically as I wrote it.
I'll help you, but by your old self will help you through the medium of me.
It was just I was at a bus stop on my way to work one morning and overheard this really unsettling conversation of this woman talking with these strangers at the bus stop about how her boyfriend cheated on her with a man, and everybody at the bus stop just like pounced in on it and started like just saying all these like really hateful things. Meanwhile, I'm like just kind of like standing there, like kind of like listening, and then trying to like, it's just like that when you realize what's happening, it's this like you go through this thing where you try to make yourself as small as possible so that you're not like exposed or and therefore like put into a position where you have to defend yourself or like you
don't want to become invited or involved in this conversation.
Yeah, or to become like a scapegoat for the like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like that woman was cheated on and that is very painful, you know, like I totally feel that pain, but also recognizing how the ways that she's discussing it only invite the ability to scapegoat another queer person for this, for like, it's not that he's gay that was the painful part, you know, it's that he cheated on her.
Yeah.
But like, it's easier for her to like deal with that pain by scapegoating it
Absolutely.
around his sexuality. When we're talking about how we create social change, I mean, there's some part of it that is like information gap, you know, and so that's some stuff that I concentrate on. Some of it is just like a lack of understanding or being able to like communicate across differences. And then part of it is that last element too, you know, and that's not an exhaustive list or anything, but
sure.
I don't know, I feel like some of these songs are definitely getting at some of the same things, but through different examples to try to illustrate that in a way that makes sense.
Are there other specific songs that you think are analogous, doing a similar thing?
So sometimes I feel like is in conversation with what we were talking about with amendments.
Okay.
In terms of that, like the tension of desperately needing radical change, but also like the tension of having to work within the system to achieve that, in a system that is like very slow.
Right.
And that was just like one of my most straightforward lyrical songs as well. You know, it's just like, sometimes I think that not much will ever change, but what else can I do? You know? I started just with the instrumental track and then added the vocal melody just as ooze. And for a while I didn't expect to do anything with it because I couldn't come up with any lyrics that seemed to fit.
Yeah.
But then I liked this idea of having these like pretty depressing lyrics in this like otherwise sort of like chill, go with the flow.
Yeah.
Chill, go with the flow, like boopity bop little thing, you know?
Yeah, really, I love that too. Yeah.
And so I thought that like, especially with like all this material that can be like so heady and heavy, I thought that it was like a funny little musical joke.
It really is, yeah. It sits really interestingly with all of the other songs because, you know, you're so passionately involved in like, communicating these important things, and somebody might say, well, you know, what difference?
Yeah, in that way, I think it's probably the most relatable song from the commission. I feel like part of the purpose of that song is also like a recognition that caring about something and investing your energy in something doesn't necessarily like negate the fact that you can be like reflective of the actual impact of it. And indeed, you need to be reflective of what your actual impact is if you're going to be effectively organizing for social change, you know?
There are two, you highlight in the essay that there are two demons on the shoulder of the politically conscious individual, and these demons are the nihilistic pessimism that is a manifestation of our worst fears, and then
which is just like, nothing I do is going to change anything, so why even bother in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then there's this other false absolution. Could you talk a bit more about false absolution and how one might avoid it?
Well, I mean, so that's like I didn't like spill the milk, so why do I need to mop it up?
Right.
It's like if you walk into a house that has a glass of spilled milk on the ground and you're going to be in there for a little bit, like, clean up the fucking milk, otherwise it's going to be nasty in a couple days.
Sure.
You know? I mean, part of the problem that we're in right now is that we continue to not clean up the spilled milk for generations, and we just keep spilling some more milk on top of it.
Another good metaphor. Like, even when you're off duty.
And those are like two things that I can get into sometimes too, you know, in the work that I do. And it's like, again, I think that like naming things and taking a step back to recognize that, not trying to like berate yourself for thinking that, but recognizing that that's a really real feeling, and like how can you sit with that reality while still believing in the moral imperative of doing that work. You know?
You discovered through the process of the Cedar Commissions that you were an unintentional Puritan.
Yeah.
How so?
I have never sworn in a song before the commission.
until fucking guns, which has swearing in the title, obviously.
Yeah. If you're gonna do it, go big. You know?
Of course, the lyric there is, "I don't want a good guy with a gun. It's still a fucking gun," which is a great lyric. Even better than that, "I don't want a good guy if there's still a smoking gun." So there you are with the same. Again, using the wordplay and this idea of the smoking gun, this metaphor to bring something home to people in a way that clearly needs to be brought home.
Yeah, because like a good guy with a smoking gun is still somebody getting shot.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
It's still an issue.
Yes. Another means that you use in the pamphlet to approach this issue is the Phoenix Rising sculpture. There's just so many levels of what's going on there. The melting down, the literal melting down of guns, and then creation of a statue of a phoenix from those guns. Could you talk a bit more about? Could you give a bit more context about this Phoenix Rising statue and how it relates to the song and your thoughts?
Yeah. So. It's a sculpture that sits between the Hennepin County Government Center and Minneapolis City Hall in downtown. And I believe it was like sometime in the mid-90s, either the city or the county government hosted a gun buyback program, and they had like overwhelming participation.
Yeah. So you said in the essay, I can quote the authority of Nikki. So in 1992, there was a gun collection, and in 6 days, 6,109 guns were returned, collected.
Yep. And then also on that page, I talk about the most recent gun buyback program that happened in our community that was shut down after I think a day, because they had so much interest in it that they had used up all of their funds before they could even make a dent in the amount of guns that the community was trying to get out of the community.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I find that so compelling, I mean, there's beautiful artistic imagery you're getting at, from the ashes of gun violence, we can rise and create a world that is more beautiful. But it's also just such a unbelievably simple solution to this this huge, this major problem that impacts every corner of the country and every community in some way, which is just, we have so many fucking guns, and we don't need that many guns. Yeah. And there are so many different studies that have shown that the presence of a gun in a house increases the likelihood of domestic violence and somebody being killed, and especially women and children. The prevalence of guns in our society is the only statistically relevant thing when you look at gun violence across the world.
Gun ownership.
It's so easy to get a gun. And there are so little controls over how people can access and use guns that it just is right for people to abuse it, And I mean, in the essay I did not get to the constitutional elements of the Second Amendment, and there's so many debates around within our lifetimes, the legal changes that have led to this right for an individual to own an unlimited supply of assault rifles, which is just absurd. And even some like former conservative Supreme Court judges have said that this is like the biggest scam that the NRA has perpetrated on the American people. Is this belief that that guns are a right. Yeah. And then on top of that, sorry, obviously there's just like so many elements to how stupid guns are.
Yes.
There's like people have this idea, like the Second Amendment people have this idea that a gun is somehow going to prevent government tyranny. It's like, yo, if the government is coming for you, a gun's not going to stop them. Like, look at how we bomb the Middle East with drones like every 2 weeks at this point. You know, it's like warfare has changed so substantially since the Constitution was written that there is no way that your fucking handgun is gonna save you. Yeah. You know? So, it's just so ridiculous.
It is so ridiculous. There's one song that we haven't talked about, and purposefully I've left it to last because it's the one that you co-wrote with both Jacob and Amy, who is now in City Councillor. And it is called Wing Beats Wind, and it is using the metaphor of a dragon.
Yes.
To convey what regarding what?
To talk about the absurdity of wealth hoarding.
Yeah.
And like our how docile we are as we are literally being robbed blind.
Right. In the dark.
Yep.
In the lyrics refer to the night time. The dragon, of course, would be working at the night, but
and talking about the like Republican tax bill that was passed in the middle of the night, that members were given like an hour or two to read through a bill that was like this long. So yeah, again, like I had previously been toying with this analogy of like wealth hoarding and dragons and like violence through that way for a while.
So the dragon metaphor is yours.
Yes. Yeah. But most of the lyrics are started from Jacob.
Okay.
And so, we like just got together one night, started talking about things that were on our mind. Jacob and Amy and I talk a lot about like capitalism.
Yeah,
and
Jacob and Amy, who are thoughtless, right?
Yeah.
In case we should clarify. And our friends, who we were just talking about.
So like we talk about capitalism and neoliberalism a lot, and so it made sense for us to try to tackle that in the form of a song, since that has already been such a meaty part of our discussions.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring some more people into the composition process just to add some like textural differences in like between the songs. Like was one of my biggest fears when I set out to compose this music was that, like, unlike in electronic music where you can just push a button and you have an entirely different sound to work with, I'm working with only 8 instruments, and I need to try to make like an entire body of work that is interesting and compelling enough throughout like a 45-minute time span, without getting to like mix it up a lot.
Right.
And so I'm like, what better way to do that than to just like switch up the composers?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And to introduce the choir halfway through, for example.
Yeah.
In the performance. Is it nature? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Like those are the beginnings of the 3 different verses.
Yeah.
So what is the song exploring regarding nature and nurture?
This idea of inevitability, that like capitalism is and that wealth inequality is something that is as natural as a tree growing outside.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it in terms of like this idea that people think of capitalism as a natural system and economics as a sort of science akin to physics or chemistry, which it is totally not.
On the basis of like certain assumptions about the inherent selfishness of humans.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to re-experience these songs in the new format on Thursday.
It's going to be so fun.
It is going to be so fun. And I'm also looking forward to experiencing them in the original format at Ice House on June the 9th.
Yep.
And then forever on the Back to the City YouTube channel when the session comes out in mid-June. Thank you very much for joining me today, Nikki. Yeah, high five.
Thank you.
More interview should end with that. Sorry, I didn't do a very good one.
There we go. Yeah, we're great.
Cool, and I will see you on Thursday and many other times beyond that in the future.
So excited.
Join us on Thursday. I've been Simon Calder. This is Back to the City. We'll see you at Mortimer's on Thursday.